Procedural errors add 3 seconds per infraction and are assessed when a shooter fails to follow the shooting procedures set forth in a written stage description, a shooter breaks a rule of the game, or a shooter violation described in the shooter's code of conduct is determined by the match director. A PE is assessed for each type of infraction. If a shooter commits more than one type of infraction, such as using a wrong specified hand and firing an incorrect number of shots, a separate PE is assessed for each type of infraction. For cover violations or fault line, the number of cover PEs cannot exceed the number of positions of cover. A flagrant penalty, FP, adds 10 seconds and is assessed instead of a procedural in cases where an infraction results in a competitive advantage, such as failure to follow the instructions in a course of fire and gaining a competitive advantage that cannot be addressed by a PE. For example, scores work out in a competitor's favor with a PE added instead of a flagrant penalty. Flagrant penalties are assessed when a shooter fails to follow the shooting procedures set forth in a written stage description and or uses inappropriate equipment with the obvious intent of gaining a competitive scoring advantage, or a shooter breaks a rule of the game, or a conduct violation described in the shooter's code of conduct as determined by the match director.
Next, I'll show actions that can result in flagrant penalties. Understand that these are not an absolute and can potentially result in a flagrant penalty if the action results in a competitive advantage that cannot be addressed by a procedural alone.
Examples of flagrant penalties, non-exclusive list: strong hand, weak hand strings or stages, shot freestyle, not going prone when required, not fully engaging all targets as required, not following stage requirement that takes longer than 3 seconds to perform, shooting an entire array while faulting the line, staging an ammunition feeding device incorrectly, extra rounds in a magazine. All flagrant penalties must be approved by the match director. Okay, let's now put these into practice. The course of fire is to engage targets when they become visible from points of cover with 2 rounds each. Okay, what's the call? Did you notice that he engaged the targets out of order? What penalty did the shooter earn here? A procedural. A shooter breaks the rule of the game, and all targets must be engaged in tactical priority, including all targets engaged in the open.
Stand by. If you're finished, unload, so clear.
The shooter shot the entire array with his foot over the fault line. What would you call? A shooter who engages a target while faulting the line, which is defined by the shooter touching the ground or other objects on the non-cover side of the fault line, shall be assessed a procedural. This penalty is faulting the pointed cover fault line. The question now is, did he gain a scoring advantage of more than 3 seconds? No. The shooter earns a procedural.
Stand by.
This time the shooter clearly faulted the point of cover fault line and had a clear advantage. What would you call? Since there was a clear advantage of more than 3 seconds in this course of fire, this will earn the shooter a flagrant penalty, 10 seconds. Call the match director. Now we move to another course of fire where the shooter must engage the targets from both pointed covers using the strong hand, weak hand only. The shooter may go to either side first, but from the right side use the right hand only, and from the left side use the left hand only.
Are you ready? Stand by.
The shooter used both hands while engaging the first array of targets. After the first array, he realized his mistake and engaged the second array weak hand only. He did not gain a better than 3-second advantage. What penalty did he earn? A procedural, 3 seconds.
Are you ready? Stand by.
Okay, what did you see? There was actually 2 infractions here. The first was the use of both hands during the entire stage, and the second was faulting the line for the last target engagement. What would you call? The first infraction resulted in a better than 3-second advantage to the shooter, and the second did not. Since there was 2 infractions and one resulted in the advantage, the shooter earned both the flagrant penalty for using both hands and a procedural for faulting the line. Call the match director.
Stand by.
Was there a penalty earned here? Did you notice that the shooter did not reload throughout this 12-shot stage? Since the shooter did not have to reload and he gained a better than 3-second advantage, Rule 522G, extra rounds in the magazine, this shooter earned a flagrant penalty. Call the match director. This video shows the differences between procedurals and flagrant penalties. Please read the rule book, and if you have any questions, ask your match director or area coordinator. Thank you.
You've earned yourself a flagrant penalty. Very good.